So that's just over 100 years ago. So you know that this mound has no relationship to those houses being built up there. And so some of us who want to continue to the top can. This is the way we prefer people coming up here because of that burial there. We've been up here partying. Oh yeah. And this is just recent. The last time I was up here, there was no one up here. Outside of the beer bottles, you can see the shape of the mound. That's the hedge where Cheryl is standing. Goes out that way. And this here is one of the wings. It goes down. And that's the other wing that goes down. And they touch at the bottom. That's the way the ancient thunderbirds were built, where their wings actually come around and touch at the bottom. And people that originally built mounds like this, they started building them in the south, and they also, through trade and sharing of knowledge, ended up, people up here started building them too, because they have ancient thunderbird mounds down in Louisiana, built at the same time as this one. So, and there's a culture called Poverty Point that by anthropology, that they call the people that built the mounds at that time. And there was a whole thunderbird chieftainship priesthood evolved around that. And thunderbird, as in our language we call Hino, and Hino was someone who had both of those negative, positive energies within themselves. And one was like a defender, and the other one was a healer. So the leaders of the people that were the thunderbird leaders had those capabilities to do both anytime. Position of the thunderbird is in the right position because the head of it is going towards the east and the wings is pointed towards the west. So this was put here to mark the pathway of the thunders that come from the west, from the river. And at certain times of the year, when all the leaves are off of the trees and whatnot, you can hear the river from here. Now, when they put those weirs in, it kind of lessened the noise a little bit from the river. But when our people would stand up here, they knew where they were at because of the sound from the river.
So this would be like a high point in an amphitheater.
Yes.
Sort of with the river.
Like a natural amphitheater here. And your voice carries. Like when all the leaves are off of the trees down here, people would be sitting up there, and you could actually stand here and teach, like speak to them from here, and they could hear you because the sound would travel. And that's another characteristic of the mounds, is they were built in places where sound would travel. And a lot of times sounding was done just by itself through using various instruments. It would just come here and sound, and that sound would travel. They would bring drums, they would bring rattles, they would bring, they would take these huge shells and cut the end of it off and blow into it, and that would just reverberate all over the place. That's what our people would do. And when they would do that from these places, at certain times, it would send a signal and a message to all the other sacred sites and mounds. This is a way of our people communicating with each other at that time. And that's why these sites are so important to us, because they form a network. It's like if you were to take out certain parts of a cell phone network, it wouldn't work too well. Well, that's what happens when you start taking out these mounds like this, because they're part of a network. Then that network starts to fall apart. And that's why things are going the way they're going on the earth now, is because too many of our sacred sites have been destroyed, just randomly, without any care, without any knowledge of how important they are. And when you look back in time, when these were built, there were things going on in the earth at that time that people were trying to overcome. People are trying to live through a lot of catastrophes. One example was 3,400 years ago, there was a volcano that erupted in Iceland, and the ash from that volcano went into the sky, and it caused the earth to go dark in the whole northern hemisphere, and people couldn't live in the northern hemisphere. They were forced to move south of that, and that lasted for about 3 years, where the sun was just blackened out, so nothing would grow. You couldn't hunt, fish, gather in that area. Everything died. There was no light, no light for 3 years in that whole area. So that's one of the things that happened 3,400 years ago. And when you follow that, you'll see that that's when a lot of these mounds started to pop up here and there, being built here and there because of the death and the wars that were going on, because it forced people to fight other people to survive. And that's what happened. Is there was this big bloodshed that went on with many of our nations before the Great Law came, and it lasted for many, many, many years, to the point I was told by one of my Ojibwe teachers long ago that that's where the pipestone came from, was a result of all that bloodshed that went on with our people on Turtle Island, all those wars, fighting each other to survive. And so now we use that pipestone in a different way. It's a way of peace of all human beings. When we come together and smoke that pipe with that red stone, that's to symbolize peace. So that's the positive that has come out of how that pipestone was created. And I see where others feel that there's energy here too. That's what draws people to come here and do these things. And somehow, in their own way, they're trying to acknowledge the energy here, but it's not the way that we would acknowledge it. And these sorts of things should not be going on here. If people want to come here and show respect, it's good to do that. Bring your tobacco. Don't bring your alcohol. And only stay here for a few moments. He also traveled among his own people first. So he would have also a perfect place for him to come and teach from, because the fact it remains the village is right up there. There are so many of our people living there. And it was like a natural amphitheater where thousands of people could gather up there, and where they built ancient mounds. And Jacqueline was going to come today, and she's part Serbia. She's Jewish. She's also Serbian. And she was telling me on the phone that from her knowledge of the mounds from her people from Serbia 3,000 years ago, they did the same thing. They used yellow sand and red ochre over there. So that's a common thing that's used all over the world. And archaeologists should know good and well that that's a common characteristic. And why they don't, well, I think you can answer that one, eh?
Yes.
It was a way, it was a medicine in itself. And it was a medicine that was used to mark the people to travel on that journey to go to the other side, you see, because there was a ceremony waiting for them when they got to the other side. So they would all be marked with this red staining, and also the red also for some cultures represents certain things like the earth, the red earth, people coming from the earth and whatnot, in a good way, in a peaceful way. So it all, to some of our people, it had different meanings, but all in all, it was peace, to have a peaceful journey, a good journey, and go on the other side and be prepared for that ceremony once they got there. And certain things were buried with them that was important in their life, and those were also covered with red ochre, those items, and we're not supposed to take them from the burials. We're supposed to leave them, because when we move any of those burial objects, because we believe that there are two spirits, one that goes the other side, one that stays over the burial and watches that burial. So what happens is when you take the bone and take the artifacts away, that spirit that's there goes looking for those things, you know, so it disturbs that journey, interrupts it. So that's why we don't have a ceremony to relocate burials to another place. You know, we don't have, because we never intended for our ancestors to be disturbed. When they were put somewhere, they were supposed to be there for forever in that place. And so that's why we fought really hard for this place here, because it is one of the 5 that's left like it in all of North America.
Wow.
You know, the old Thunderbird mounds, there's only 5 of them, and this is one of them. Coming from here, eh? So like I said before, this is woodland marsh, and this used to be all wet in here. All wet back to the hillside there. So our people didn't have too far to come to get water. They wouldn't have to go down to the river per se. They could just come down to this little spring here and get water. And going up and down that hill required a lot of strength. As
you know, and I don't know, I didn't have that whole background of what it was at
I know.
that time, right?
It's an amazing thing just since I've been doing this work, and yeah, I used to hang out in High Park and had no idea, and now, you know, these
5,000 people, how much corn beans and squash you'd have to grow to support them. So this whole area in here down to the river, especially over where all those houses are, that was where the fields were at. And it's not. So in 1687, when the attack came here, it was mostly women and children and elders that were here. The men, as it was recorded, a lot of them were down in the Ohio River hunting, because it was a time when we're getting ready for ceremony for the bean dance and whatnot. It was about this time, and even back then. So the men weren't around when that attack came, and the Jesuits knew that because they came and lived amongst us for a while. So they were able to see our living patterns, and they knew when the men were here and when the women were here by themselves. So when they came here, the attack came August 5th, 1687 at noon. And as we're heading down to the place now where the French crossed over the river, and you can see even today it's a narrow, very narrow part of the river where you can basically walk right across it. And yeah. And when you look to the left, you can see how high the hill is.
Yeah.
How
So
high the hill
village
is.
was up there, right?
The
At
village
top.
was up there, yes.
I see.
Yes.
And that was kind of a protection, right? To have
Yes,
such
it's
a steep...
it's surrounded on three sides. When you see the village site here, it's like a finger that goes out,
I see.
and we're about right here right now. So we're heading down that way. We're going to weave around there. And so it's surrounded by water on three sides. That's the village up there.
So when there was the massacre, how many people died?
3,000. 3,000 because the population was 5, and so the estimate of how many were not here was about 2,000 at that time.
And I know, just shocking that there isn't like a whole huge city commemoration or something, right? Like there's
There's a map.
as we would do if it was, oh my God, for the 400 people that died or whatever in the Twin Towers or whatever, Jeez. It's like...
There's a map here that I have showing, yeah, here we go. This map was done by Percy Robinson when he met with James Babby. This map is from the 1800s, and this shows the village here on top, and this area here was the burial ground. This whole area,
I see.
7B, which we're heading into, we're curving around now. So it was a 10-acre burial site, and this is the Seneca side of the village, and that's the Mohawk side of the village. So we're in the Seneca side, and also in the same area where all the burials are at, and it was a 10-acre burial ground, and that was associated with the massacre that happened here, because we usually didn't bury our people right in the village unless you're a clan mother. Your clan mothers were buried between the poles in the longhouses, but everyone else was buried outside the village. So because of that 10-acre burial site up there, there's a reason why it's there. It wasn't there when the people were living there. It happened as a result of the massacre, which many Canadians, people living in Canada, don't think that there was ever any massacres here on this side of the lake, but there was. And this was one of them. So we'll continue down to the water.
I find that tragic when they're trying to jump up the,
That's funny.
it's not funny.
It is funny.
This is where the crossing was at, and this is where what we call Tondo in Cayuga and Seneca, it's Giondo, which means log in the water, because there was a great white pine log that stretched across the river right here, and the people could walk right across this point. This is the narrowest part of the river right here, spot, wider up there. You can kind of see, because of the height of the water, how much more rapid it was, felt that we're there, it would even be more treacherous through here. And we were not able to bring any canoes through here at all in this piece because it's too rugged here. So people would bring their canoes across, Taj up river on this side, and they go up the Carrying Place Trail for a while, which we'll get to that, and follow that trail up a ways, and that would go all the way up to Lake Simcoe, and what was also called Lake Toronto at one time. So this is the route that Denonville and his men brought. They came up, they snuck in from that side from their ship. They came up on foot, crossed over here, and there were people working over in that area, and because that's where I took that picture a few years back. Saw the spirits in that picture. So I knew from that, and the feeling that I got from that willow tree right down there, this is the place where the attack took place first. And it caught our people by surprise, because up to that point they were very friendly with them. And of course the men weren't here to defend the village. The women and children and elders were here working by themselves. And it happened about an hour and a half ago, noon. And they tried to come in the morning early, but they were stopped by a thunderstorm. Like this morning, rain, they were stopped. And so they couldn't come in earlier as they wanted to. So that's why they waited till noon for the storm to pass. And they came in on foot this way. And whoever was here working was killed. They didn't get away. And then they proceeded to go up into the village and they burnt it. All burnt. And because it was summer, August 5th it was dry, and the winds coming from the south, it was able to carry that fire quite far. It's like having a brush fire out west in the middle of summer, and how it's sometimes hard for them to control it with airplanes. We didn't have airplanes back then. So imagine, you know, how far a fire could travel in the bush, in dryness, summer, bright conditions. And that's why the trees in this area, as I mentioned, are only a certain age. Like the oaks that were there on Jane Street are only like 260 years old. That coincides with what happened here, because it took quite some time for the tree growth to come back, for the earth to come back to a livable state. And the French didn't even live here until 1710. There's a fort called Magson Royal, which they built up here in Tioga after the village was destroyed. Right here. Two. Right there. Magson Royal, right there. 1720 to 1730. It was only there for 10 years. French fort. So between 1687 and 1720, there was nothing here. No one lived here. No one camped here. Mississaugas didn't have a village here. And because they had respect for our burial sites, like they wouldn't come and live where our burials were at. So there was no Mississauga village here ever on this side of the river. They did have a village 100 years later downriver by Old Mill. that's where the Mississauga village was at. They never had a village here. And this is even told by some of the old Ojibwe elders from up north, that when they moved down here into this area, they knew where the villages had been and where the burials were at, so they didn't set up their camp in those places where the burials were at. And this happens to be one of them. I mean, this site, Tahagon, was widely traveled by not only indigenous people, but fur traders as well. So this site was well known to many people at that time. This is also a major trading center with the fur trade at that time. It was even more major than Ganatsawagan. At one time, Ganatsawagan was the major trade center, but then it got changed to Tahagon. So in the mid-1600s, this became a larger village, Ganatsawagan. There's a population difference of 2,000 between Ganatsawagan and Tahagon. So that's a smaller village on the east side, not as...
Where is Ganatsawagan?
On the Rouge.
Okay.
Right where the Rouge enters into the lake,
Okay.
up on the high point.
Okay.
That's where Ganatsawagan was at. And I think I have a map showing that here as well. Somewhere.
Is it over there as well?
I haven't been there. I want to go.
Yeah, right here. There's a map of Ganatsawagan.
Okay, but
That's the Rouge right there, eh? Yeah. So, and these are old maps. This one also shows Tahagon right there, and there's Ganatsawagan over there, right there. Ganatsawagan. So that's from 1673, that's Joliet's map. Another thing about the village too, there seems to be a lot of confusion about when it was established. People say that it was only established in the 1660s as a trading village, and there was no village here before at all. But there's been archaeological evidence to prove otherwise. Since one of the stops that we're going to do is they found a 600-year-old Seneca woman buried in 1999 in someone's front yard. And they were doing some alterations of their yard when they found her. So how they know who she was what was buried with her. There was a pot that was buried with her and a comb. And they could tell by the comb, the bone comb, what nation she was, what clan she was, and all that. So she was Seneca Bear Clan because it's got two opposing bears on the comb and a panther as well. So, and that's from 1999 back 600 years, which would make her burial 1399 AD. So the presence of our people here at Tahagon goes quite far back. A lot further back than 1660 AD. Up there.
I see.
And this one runs north and south along the Humber. And it goes all the way up to Lake Simcoe. So it's a trade route.
Yeah.
It was used for hundreds of years. Not just during the time of the French, but we've been using it for hundreds of years for trade with the nations to the north. Come down here. So it's not something that the French have a corner on the market on, or the settlers that come here having a corner in the market. We were using this trail for thousands of years. I mean, the Thunderbird, 6,000 years old. And we always located our villages near our old sacred sites. as a way of protecting them. And that was a request of the old people, the area neutral people, who their ancestors built them. So when they became a part of us, that was part of the agreement, was that we were supposed to look after all those sacred sites for them. And so all of our villages, 1400s forward, are located along these sacred mounds, these old ancient mounds, for that reason.
I'm always hot.
So that's why this village is here, not just as a trade village.
Oh, yeah,
See, that's why they're trying to discredit all the mounds, is because the mounds take the history of our people back further than 300 years or 500 years or what have you. That goes back 6,000 years. The only thing that predates their Adam and Eve story, per se, I guess. They want to eradicate it. They want to get rid of it. They don't want to acknowledge it, because then that throws a monkey wrench in all that, eh? They've been teaching people all these years. That's why the Red Hill Valley, all those sites in Red Hill are destroyed, because there was a site there that was 10,000 years old.
Really? Wow.
And so that even is older than the mounds here. And there is a connection between the sites in Red Hill and the sites here too, eh? It's a part of that Thunderbird Triangle that connects with Niagara River, Niagara Falls, Red Hill Valley here, and it's part of that west triangle of that medicine wheel that's centered in at Tainanaga.
Where's Tainanaga?
It's over by Belleville in Kingston.
Oh, okay. Yes.
It's kind of in between.
Yes, I know where that is then. Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I was thinking.
Some people say Tainanaga, some people say Tainanaga. So, but we all know where it's at when we say it, usually. And that was the birthplace of the great peacemaker there. And so that was the center of all this, all these sites around this area. And there's even sites in Ohio and down that way that connect with that same medicine wheel. There was also the medicine triangle down in Ohio near Sandusky that was used for healing. People would be brought there for healing because the water had that property in it. And it's all connected under the ground through water. And it forms a triangle down there. So that's part of that south, part of that whole medicine wheel that's part of this medicine wheel. So that's why, another reason why our people are connected from here to there, to out west, east, north, and because we traveled to all those special places to have ceremony and whatnot. And we also had relatives, different of our communities. And some of our people, even back during the 1800s, they would stay one place for a few years with their relatives, and they go to another community of our people and they would stay there with their relatives for a few years, and because their names, the same person's name would show up on the censuses in different places. So you knew that's what was happening, right? Just move around and stay with relatives. It was nothing different for us to do that until they started separating us and segregating us even more and saying, well, you're a part of this community, so you have to stay here, you know, type thing, and make it hard for people to travel from one community to another because of all these lines of demarcation that they created, when before we never had those issues. We could go wherever we wanted to. this pathway is not really where the natural passageway is at. Bit down that way, and it's hard to see now because of all the leaves of the trees, but you can see the natural gap in between the hill, and that was that natural path that people would just walk right through easily up this hill. I can't imagine them walking up this hill here. You'd break a leg a few times going up and down, and it's so steep. But there's like a separation between the hill where you could just walk right up to the village. So are you ready to? Right? Yeah, it used to be right down there.
Oh yeah,
steps, and it's not here.
that's right.
I don't know what happened to that monument.
It was a plaque, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the Carrying Place Trail plaque, and it's gone. So.
Better double check on that.
Yeah. Back 5 years ago, that was still here.
Yeah.
That's why I brought you here. Show you that plaque. Because right up there is the Carrying Place Trail.
There was.
Yeah, I have photographs of it.
The other Tiegon plaque is still there, but it's up here further, and it's only about 2 feet from the top of the ground, so that when you, here in the winter, you can't even see it. Because Donna and I brought Darnie down here once, and we rode around, and I tried to show it to them, and it was just barely sticking out of the top of the snow. So they really need to make it better.
Well, and it
plaque.
doesn't do a proper
No.
commemoration of the site either.
No, it doesn't. Not at all. There's only a little blurb about it being a Iroquoian village, but they don't say who lived here.
No.
You know, and they need to say who lived here.
And it
And
sort of talks more about the colonials who
That's right.
came and stuff.
that seems to be the thing here in Toronto, eh? They seem to want to not acknowledge our existence too much.
Well, that's what the kind of, as I've been reading over the history and stuff, they always say, well, you know, the Toronto Carrying Place Trail was used by fur traders, missionaries, explorers, and, you know, the native groups. But it's like, but didn't the native people make the trails?
That's right, yes.
Aren't they part of their, you know, they kind of make it seem like, I don't know.
They seem
They
like,
just happened to use it, but they weren't the.
and we weren't here that long to use it.
Yeah.
Now this is Babby Point
Which way?
Terrace. I think that we are, look this here. What does it say? This is Babby Point Terrace. I think that this was, yeah, this was the place here.
I always get lost in Babby Point.
This whole area, you just walk through. This whole area is a burial site. Old burial ground. It goes down that way and up that way. There's a street called the Strange Place, which means in French, the strange place.
Lestrange.
Yeah, the strange place. It means that there's something strange that goes on in that street, like something out of the ordinary. And a lot of these people living in these houses have reported spiritual activity going on in their house, like seeing spirits, seeing people, our people walking.
Villages here
Yes.
and people buried here.
That's right.
They just
That are
Take
not
care
being
of
honored, really? That whole thing with the honoring
Yes.
of that.
Well, the way our people were buried here, 1687, they were buried in haste. Because when the French came, destroyed the village, they had to leave quickly, the survivors. Was left. So they buried the people very quickly in singular burials all over the place, singular mound burials all throughout this area, because it was reported by Percy Robinson when he came to visit James Babby that that's the way it was, because even in 1810 when Babby bought all this land, it was left that way. He never tilled the ground over here at all. He only grazed certain areas of it with cattle, but it didn't, and he had orchards in certain parts of it, but not agricultural crops. So this whole area was never tilled at all. And when these houses were built, they were built by Homewood and in the 1900s, and they were built the old British style. So when they built them, they only disturbed where the house foundations are at. So still today, they find things in people's yards, artifacts and burials. So this is a site here of a 600-year-old Seneca woman that they found in 1999 when they were doing some work, these wires here and whatnot. They ran into her, and they relocated her without our knowledge, and that was done by an individual that Donna and I know.
He lives here in
He lives here in Toronto.
Yeah, I think I read it somewhere.
Yes, and he's saying that the clan mothers asked him to look after this. Well, I'm kind of wondering what clan mothers he talked to about moving her. I don't think it's the same ones we know, because they don't seem to know anything
That
about
little
this.
rock over there, what is that? Monument?
Where? Right over there?
Thing there.
Could be. Go back.
Maybe that's where they moved the monument.
Here is that. Yeah. And then we'll keep going around inside the village, like they could live in one section of the village for a period of 20 years, and then they'd move to another section of the village and let that part of the village rest because it was so huge. You know, as you can see by our walk today, it's a large village site. But our people didn't live in the whole village all the time. You know, they would have been
So they would actually leave it and let it rest, like let that area land and that whole place rest.
Yes.
Isn't that interesting?
let it rest for a period of time and then move back. Because they showed layers of when there was archaeological testing done, or it showed layers of where the longhouses were different positions over top of each other. So you knew from that that there was periods of long occupation here, and it wasn't just a period of 40 years. And there was actually people living here in the 1300s and 1100s and 1200s and off and on. And then of course they would move the village up and down the river too, eh? So there are other sites on this side of the river where the village was at, and even further north. And as well on the other side of the river there were sites, because wherever the land went out like that, like a thumb or a finger, there was a village there at a high point. Something that people chose. Now that is a grandmother tree. Yes.
So how old do you think?
Yeah. No maple. This is a monument that we couldn't see the last time. It was all covered by snow.
Etienne was the first white man, okay, to see Lake Ontario.
Tin Brûlé, yeah. A word about him. He was Champlain's sidekick, and he was only a teenager when he first came here. He's only about 17, 18 years old, and so he started out in the east, by Montreal. Quebec City, that area first. They came in that way. And then as they moved to the west, they got involved with some of the people that call themselves Algonquin up there. And came with some of them to where some of the Wendat villages were at in the north. And they stayed there with the Wendat for about a year and a half, the villages. Learned their language and everything. And some of the Wendat men brought the Attendi through here in 1615. And when he got here, either they took him away from here, or they didn't really bring him through here, because he said there was nobody living here in 1615. So that's what some of the people have based a lot of their theories on about our people, about how long we've been here, that we were only here for a certain length of time, and when the Attendi came here, there was nobody here type thing, but there were people here.
Perhaps protective though, right?
Yeah.
Just not wanting to let
Yeah.
the French know so much?
Because what happened was the earlier people that had lived in this area, a lot of them left because of the diseases. The survivors had left, and so they didn't want to live around here because of that association, a lot of them. So there were people living here, but maybe not in a huge village, like 5,000 people in 1615. And it wasn't until that our population started to regroup itself and reestablish itself that the large villages reoccurred again. Because if you can imagine, like when 90% of your population be wiped out, you know, what kind of what kind of fear that would cause among the people, why this would happen, you know, when it would happen again type thing. And there would be no discrimination of who the disease is attacked. So chiefs, clan mothers, people, anyone died of these diseases. So that left our communities in a lot of disarray. And many of the people that were living together in their own villages ended up coming and living together in communal villages because of that. So we could take care of each other, regain our strength in numbers. And so when he came through here, that may have been what happened, why he said there was nobody here, because the numbers have decreased so much that there were small pockets of people living here and there, and not in a huge palisaded village in this area. So this village here, people came back to it in about 1620. That doesn't mean we weren't here before, because then you have that Seneca woman buried here that's 600 years ago. So how can that be if our people were never here before 1660? How can you have a Seneca woman buried in the same village site that's 600 years old or better? So that's something to keep in mind.
And so there hasn't been archaeologists or whatever really doing anybody sort of researching the real history?
Well, what's happened is only, yeah, we could get it. There has been a little bit, but only if somebody's going to do an alteration in their yard, then of course that's a requirement for them to call an archaeologist.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
If they find something.
Another big stone.
Never noticed that before.
Yeah.
See what that is. Down there at the entrance is where the stone gateway is, and it dates the year that they started building all these houses over here, which was in 1912. So from 1810, when James Babby came here from Detroit, who, by the way, is mixed blood. His father was a Wyandot chief at Andradon, and his mother was Shawnee, who's related to Blue Jacket and all them. So he was French and Shawnee and Wyandot by blood, by family ties. But I guess by our consideration, he would have been Shawnee, because that's what his mother was. But in other words, they had knowledge of this place, and that's why he came here to Toronto and bought all this land, because he knew what it was before, because of his native ancestry and whatnot. So that's a little bit about Babby. It's actually pronounced Bobby, I guess, Bobby, like Bobby. And when you see it, it says like baby. It's not pronounced that way. Some people want to call it baby, but it's. And his estate was right down here in this corner of Jane and Annette, and that's two of his daughters' names. One was Jane and one was Annette.
Ah, wow.
And his house was
Wow.
right across the street there in the corner and whatnot. So this whole area over here, when he was living here, was just all like orchards and whatnot, and he left it the way it was. So when Percy Robinson came here and recorded all the history in this area, and he wrote a book called Toronto During the French Regime, and so he marked out the whole site. He marked out the village sites, the way it was, and the burials. I think I showed you this already, but good to get a picture of it. Yeah, here we go.
Oh yeah. Around the corner up there.
Yeah. And this map was hand-drawn by Percy Robinson. And you can find this in the archives, the Ontario Archives. So this is where we're at right now, in this trail called the Humber Trail. And so we're heading this way now. As we go to the south, as soon as you get to that drop, that's the other part of the village. That's the Mohawk side of the village.
Okay. Well, you seen the turtle up there, right?
Yeah,
Drive slow.
yes.
Oh yeah, there.
Is this the Carrying Place Trail, or?
That's the Carrying Place Trail there,
Yeah.
yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, that goes all the way up to Lake Simcoe.
Yeah, that's the Carrying Place Trail plaque. The Carrying, yeah.
There's one down there.
Yeah, that's the plaque there, eh?
This is what it's all about now, dear.
All nations, yeah.
Yeah, well, the Mohawk people lived in this side of the village, and they're from the the lower Mohawk originally. That's where they come from to live here. And the way the land is, you can see that because this is the lower plateau, and where the Senecas lived, that's the upper plateau. And we're known as the people of the Great Mountain. So we liked,
Senecas, or?
yes, we chose higher places to live because of that. So that's why you have that cultural association with the land, with the higher plateau and the lower plateau.
So the way the Mohawks are upper and lower then?
Yes, there's upper, lower, middle.
Well, the Cugars are upper and lower too, eh?
Yes, and that's because of the villages that they came from over there on the Hudson River. There's three main villages. There was the upper Mohawk and the middle Mohawk and the lower Mohawk. So the lower Mohawk is where the people came to live here. And some people think that this may have been a village that represented all the whole Confederacy because it had 50 longhouses and we have 50 clans. You see, so there could be that association too as well. The number of longhouses. So there's a lot of things that we're learning about this place. There's a lot of things that we know about it because we don't know everything. There's so much that we've lost, and even a lot of our people at Six Nations didn't even know that we have people that lived here. They didn't know that we had villages in Toronto, a lot of them. And that's because of that education, you know, the white way of educating us and only keeping certain things, teaching us certain things about who we are and whatnot. And then of course if our own elders don't talk and don't share these things with us, then that knowledge gets lost. There were a few people that knew about these places like Jake Thomas and Hubert Buck and some of the older people that are not with us anymore. So people that are living today, a lot of our people don't have the knowledge of these places here like we should.
Yeah.
You know, we should have this knowledge because it's important to pass on to our children and our grandchildren that we were here. And it's like when I walk on that area where there's the upper plateau and the lower plateau, it's almost like I can hear the people on the other side saying, "Hi, Scano." And the other side they're saying, "Hi, Sago," to each other, you know, because that's how it was here. You know, people lived together in peace and harmony, and there wasn't all this fighting going on. And you can tell that by the energy of this place, that this wasn't a place where people fought with each other. It's very peaceful here. Even today, that energy carries forward to the here and now. And that's the power of the great law. Peace, power, good minds, and reasoning. And it's another reason why this place is so special to us.
Just for the camera, can you just say again why we're doing this walk today?
We were doing this walk today to retrace the footsteps of our ancestors back to the time when they were here as a vibrant community in this place, and to have some of that experience of our ancestors, and to be able to carry that forward into the future generations by just being here. And then by being here, you can tell other people about it.
And what event are we commemorating?
Well, it's not really something to celebrate. I mean, you don't celebrate the massacre of the people
No.
but to remember it,
Commemorate.
to remember it, so that way we learn from those things. And by learning from those things, we hopefully will not subject ourselves to the same things over again, like what happened then. And part of it was trust, like we shouldn't have trusted too much, but we did. We still are. We're very trusting people. We get burnt over and over and over again because we trust too much. And without really knowing the people that we're trusting. But that's just our way, is to just accept people for who they are and what they are, you know, until they prove otherwise, eh? So, and our ancestors did that too. And that's why what happened to them happened, you know, like if the women would have said, well, I don't think you should leave, I think you should stay, they would have stayed and protected the village. But that didn't happen. The men left the women unprotected and the children and the elders. That's what happened. So we learn from those situations that in the future, if something like that was to happen again, I don't think we do that again. Unless we want to have a repeat of the whole history all over again.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a matter of learning lessons from the past to carry forward to the future, so that we can live better and more positively in the future. That's the way I think about it. I don't know how you think about it, but